We're going to get started. Rich Wolf would kick this off, so I've asked Jim Dieter, our treasurer, to step in and say hello. So hold this mic around here. They're new mics, so they should sound pretty good.
All right, what am I saying?
You're just going to say hello,
right.
Call the meeting order.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. Any new faces? Anybody want to make an announcement?
Hello, I'm Zach Newsom, the new director of Acorn Public Library.
Yay! So I told Zach just now that he can call any of us for assistance, so you better answer his calls if he calls you. All right. Anybody else? Want to make an announcement? Introduce themselves? Tell us they're retiring?
We're streaming over the internet, by the way.
Oh, wonderful! Great.
Wave to the cameras.
All right. Okay. Nothing else from the crowd? All right.
I'll take it from here, if you don't mind.
I don't mind it.
Hi, everyone. I'm glad to see a lot of people I haven't seen before, so I think this meeting has sort of attracted a lot of people that aren't necessarily directors. They're here to listen about the migration, perhaps from the SWAN perspective, but certainly today I'd like to hear a little bit from you all, or a lot of it from you all, on some of the issues you may have with anything like this. As a migration, you can get into the weeds pretty fast in terms of details. So I do have staff here in the back row. Hey, wave your hands. There they are. They're usually huddled up there. If we need to follow up with you after the meeting, just know we may need to do that right afterwards. But I'm also going to go over some of what we're going to be looking at coming up soon in the June meeting. So hello, everyone. I'm Aaron C.O.W. I'm the executive director of SWAN. You probably saw me last in full bearded mode. So I shaved at that September meeting, and then I had not shaved up until, I think it was April 15th. It was supposed to go live. There was some speculation if shaving holds. So today, I know, it was too soon. I was really itching to get it off. I'd like to talk about the data migration and some of the issues with our data. Talk about the search indexes that we've had some issues with and have done a lot of work to correct. Also talk about enterprise. A big part of this migration was the third-party transition, which is something that maybe I told you about, but was a ton of work behind the scenes. Of course, talk about the training that we had provided and tickets opened and closed. That there was a lot of library staff that maybe weren't necessarily reading email, but we encouraged everyone to know that if you went to the SWAN support site, you could easily get caught up on a lot of things that were going on. Really what this whole list of memos is emphasizing is just the steps all along the way to get everything prepared within your libraries, to be able to then give you access to stress test the enterprise system, to start looking at the Symphony data, and of course all the training that occurred really after the first of the year. Well, it started with in fact, in November, and I'll touch on that also. We had a lot of surveys that we put out. At some point, we were worried about survey fatigue. This is a reference to Office Space. If you're not familiar with that movie, there were, by my count, 6 of them that were input, some options for you all to take in terms of choices with the way you wanted enterprise to work or certain areas of the configuration within Symphony. That said, this is software, so we can always begin to make adjustments to configuration. This is why the Symphony system, I think, has had a long, enduring presence in the Aliased market because it is kind of infinitely mutable. In terms of how you can configure it and how it could be expanded for things that you have at your library on an individual level or for the consortium. The PR team, I think, was also a really, really key part of this migration. This is something that we had decided to work on very early with this group of volunteers from various libraries in SWAN that were meeting with SWAN staff. They came up with a plan to bookmarks that were going to be provided to the public. Also, we created a whole new patron website, your new catalog, that would also be there to provide instructions and steps for the public to use. And we did 3 staff newsletters. I think that this was very successful, I think, in preparing library staff and the public to a certain degree about the changes that were coming. We ramped up. We had staff, SWAN staff, and actually library staff that also were all part of our training corps that worked weekends, and also leading up to that Go Live week, we had staff working really, both weekends, bookending that Go Live week, and then also there was a lot of us that were continue to work over that time. In this photo down here, there you see a lot of us that were grouped around on the Go Live day. Margaret Caldwell was our Cersei Dynamics consultant. She started with us probably back in June when we started setting up the system. The migration that Cersei Dynamics, the migration plan that Cersei Dynamics created with us, she was to come on site the day before, the day of, and the day after. She actually remained a 4th day when we were having those issues with holds and assisted with correcting with that. So they were really with us sort of as part of the team to get everything done. So I'm going to go through a lot of the data elements at this point just to talk about it. It was my best way, I think, of trying to frame a lot of the things that were going on and construct what could be a big topic to get our heads around. So in terms of the data that we're talking about, the number of patrons that are in SWAN, normally we'd say is around 1 million. Right in March, we did a purge of some of the older patron data of 120,000. So as it stood, we were talking about 880,000 records coming out. All of this data was then reformatted with a service with unique management to make sure that it was conforming to uppercase, that we were switching the name fields, and we were formatting the phone number, and they added in the zip code, formatting that. Within this process was also something called the National Change of Address. It's a US database where if you move and you put your change of address in, what Unique will do is they'll run your patron database against this, and they'll update those addresses as well. That did have a few unexpected areas of the address changing within the system. It did represent a sizable part of the patron database, as you can see in the pie chart. We are still looking at, for instance, I think there's P.O. box address changes that are technically correct as far as the post office is concerned, but at least one of our libraries has noted that the P.O. box, they'd like to have the street address also in that, and we're working to make sure that we can see what we can do to get that updated in the system. In the sort of the heat of the battle right after the first week of the migration, I want to acknowledge that we did have a period where some tickets came in that some pins had reverted back. This was miscommunication, I would say, with our Cersei Dynamics data loader. So there was like a 5-hour window where pins were a little confusing, at least as far as adding to the pin transition that everyone was putting up with. But that change was reversed on the 22nd. So it was from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. was the sort of this period where that occurred. I'll move on. Our bib database, which is a large database, 1.3 million bibs, really loaded perfectly. There were not significant issues. We did have some diacritic display issues that I wanted to note, but those were also fixed the following week after the go live. So this was how they were displaying within Symphony. And I'm going to move to items next, but I think the fact that the bibs were not a significant issue for SWAN, I think is a testament to the fact that we've really maintained sort of a focus on having a quality bib database with our 5 cataloging libraries and our centralized cataloging. There are a lot of conversations with other consortia, existing consortia right now in Illinois about how to catalog centrally, mostly because the consortia are realizing when you have 30, 100 libraries all throwing bib records in there and they never really quite match correctly, you may end up with problems, more pies and pie wedges within the big database itself. Moving on to items, there were a significant number of item issues that we encountered in those first 2 weeks. This is a representation of how things look currently. I tried to cram a few things in here, and in the next slide I'll note some of the issues that had occurred. The item database is 8 million items. It's, as you remember from one of my first slides, this is a big database in terms of other public library systems or large public libraries. Not that SWAN is exclusively public. Working on what's called a subfield E problem, just so directors are aware of it. Specifically, what does that mean? I tried to cram down in here 2 examples, and what it is right now is the way an item was cataloged. If part of the call number was put into what is called a subfield E, it's been lopped off. So it's basically showing in Millennium CD-ROC Apple or APPL-F, and it's missing, in this example, the when. So it's a long call number. Part of it's missing. We believe we're going to be able to have this all fixed up over the next couple weeks. It's a large number of records, 490,000 records. That said, there were all these other issues that we also had encountered with what we would call auto-generated barcodes. That's a Symphony term. We also had some locations that were mismapped. That 3-letter code is a SWAN code, meaning that we're saying if there was a mismap, send it to SWS. We also had create dates that were showing up in the system as 1970. All these things were fixed. So in terms of what part of the collection they represented, here are their counts. Here were the sort of percentage of the collection. But right now, as it stands, it was hard to represent what part of the 8 million would have represented, because some of these problems were, an item could have 3 of these problems simultaneously. So it's a little hard for me to kind of tease that out. But really the upshot of all this is that all this was fixed. While our Patron database, we were able to really scrub that and clean that up through a third party, there really wasn't the ability to do that with the item database. The fact that our bib database is mostly controlled by 5 libraries plus SWAN, central cataloging. Item data entry varied quite a bit over probably the 15 years since we came up in the InnoPack/Millennium system. There are a lot of things that were maybe sort of, how I say, non-standard data entry that we encountered. That said, we've done a lot of work to clean that up. There was a lot of it that we caught early when we were doing our initial test data loads, and library staff were looking at the data and reporting what they were seeing. But of course, we did catch quite a few things after the go live that we had to jump in and fix right away. Holds. SWAN has a lot of holds. There were 83,000 holds that needed to migrate. Those were extracted out of the Millennium system. I think there was some suspicion that some of the suspended frozen holds in Millennium did not come out. We confirmed that they all did arrive, but they all arrived as an active hold. Another thing which had occurred that we've confirmed is that a lot of item level holds became title level. And that was a significant number of the total hold database, so this part of the wedge. We've had a couple tickets reported in from noting that some holds did not migrate. That said, I recognize this is strictly looking at data. I think there's still a lot of areas within Symphony as far as the way the holds operate. Like I was talking with Eisenhower just a little bit in terms of how they're dealing with holds for CPL patrons or non-SWAN patrons. So there's some areas of holds, complexity of holds that we're still needing to work on. Let me stop right there for a minute because I'm going, well, let's go into the holds craziness. As my lack of an elegant way of putting it, which happened immediately at go live and the following day, and the fix was put in starting that Thursday, and that Friday morning was sort of the huge burden that we put on you all, which was to clear your hold shelf and check it all in to reset everything. We call that trust the process, or I titled that SwanCon the most important SwanCon ever because we were so focused on making sure that these holds got fixed. We knew that for libraries that had big open hold shelves that this was a big deal. And we're really sorry that it happened. I would say that Cersei Dynex recognized immediately that there were a lot of things that happened with that part of the migration just didn't look right, and we needed to take some dramatic steps to correct it. So it wasn't that hold queues were ever lost. It was more that the status of the hold, either in transit or on shelf, was not accurate. So patrons were seeing that probably right away, and staff were seeing that right away, and it was very, very confusing. And I'm probably telling you something you already know. So again, I want to give a huge thank you to libraries and that worked on us that Friday to fix it. I think going into the weekend, that Saturday, Sunday, we really wanted to make sure that things were, for the most part, stable, running, and we were continue to clean up data the following week. Let me stop right there. Is there anyone that wants to talk about that part of that process, fixing the holds during that first week? Yes, okay. Jamie?
Different question. The holds that you said you have 2 tickets, and probably one of them is ours, because we do know people whose holds did not transfer over. Are they going to get those holds back, or is there a fix, or are those just gone? Or?
At this stage, unless there were, and again, what Jamie's bringing up as far as that there were some maybe tickets that came specifically from Indian Prairie about a few patron examples of some holds that did not come over. Our investigations show that all the holds that were extracted by III, meaning what they gave out, got loaded. If there's some things that got mixed, yeah, it's sort of tricky as far as like what got missed and why. So there may be a few examples of that. There aren't plans in the works right now, I'll tell you, to retrieve those, mostly because it has not appeared to be a widespread issue. That said, we had so much holds craziness, as I'm calling it, that Wednesday, Thursday, and trying to right the ship on Friday. I don't know if people stopped reporting and just assumed that I'm just going to have to just throw up my hands and just assume that the holds were really odd for that week, and so maybe there were more widespread problems. There was a hand that went up. Hi.
Hi, I'm here on behalf of the Flossmoor Library.
Hi.
Hi there. The circulation staff has tested the situation we have with holds right now is when a non-Flossmoor patron is making a hold and utilizing Pick It Up Anywhere. So Pick It Up at the Flossmoor Library. It ends up at the bottom of the entire hold list instead of the bottom of the Flossmoor hold list, hold queue. And is there a workaround? Is there something, that
These are non-SWAN.
No, these are non-Flossmoor, so just not our own patrons. Say a staff member who doesn't live in Flossmoor places a whole
Okay.
library to have the book picked up there.
Has your group, this may sound odd, has your group reported this issue into us already?
Yes.
Okay, so we probably,
My guess is yes, Debbie.
yeah, all right, so then we're probably aware of it. I may need to follow up after this, so I'm just going to note about the Flossmoor holds. I don't know if staff want to jump in at this point before getting into the details of it, but there are some issues like that that we continue to work on. It's all part of our hold map, the hold mapping and the way circulation interplays with its mapping, and then the hold plays with its mapping, and the way, to be honest, some items were also cataloged. So there's some catalog cleanup that's also could be affecting things. Hard to say. If you encounter issues, and a lot of you have really gotten good at this, you give great examples. It happened with this patron in this scenario. Here's their barcode, and it happened with this item. Here's that barcode. That helps us immediately zero in on, we can look at like what it looked like in Millennium, what it looked like in the data that came out, what it looks like currently in Symphony, run a scenario with that, study it. There were some, early on, there were some tickets that said like, a nearby library said, their patrons have a different expiration date. You know, a little too vague, so it's more like following up to say like, can you specify which library, and maybe there's a patron you can provide an example of. Everyone's gotten really good at that. I'm just thanking you for that. Other questions about holds as far as this process that we had, comments? I know that was a tough week with holds. All right, I'll move on. This may surprise you. It surprised me. The photos and signatures that we were dealing with, we're talking about 330,000 images total. This pie chart just represents the total of the 330,000, roughly around 250,000 of those are signatures that are captured. This was a Millennium feature that actually was kind of waiting when I got here at SWAN. The membership had just been interested and acquired it. They were really interested in revamping their registration, library card registration process. So a lot of libraries, a number of libraries really went to it wholeheartedly. And there was also the ability to snap photos and put that in. When we did our RFP, we had noted that we had these two types of data elements, and we had to make sure that we were able to retain this feature moving forward. And this became a big part of the negotiation, not a big part, but a part of the negotiation with Cersei Dynix is to make sure that they were going to add this ability within the 3.5 version of Symphony. So some of the issues that we had leading up to before we went live, I think the last time I met with you all, I was expressing some anxiety saying we're having trouble with acquisitions because the 3.5 version we had was a very early beta version, and it had some big bugs in it. And the next day we did the 3.5 full upgrade. All the acquisitions problems got cleared up, and we were able to really begin testing with the ability for signatures to be captured and loaded. Since the migration, here's something that's really, really interesting to me. During the training process, there were a number of libraries that were introduced to how Symphony does and have decided that they wanted to do signatures that weren't doing them prior. Some of the reasons may be that where the camera was very expensive, and there was only one type of camera that could work in the Millennium side. The cameras to do photos of patrons. So libraries that were like, well, I'd like to have 2 cameras, but those cameras were $600 before. So they had creative ways of shooting that photo. Now it's much, much easier. And we were making sure that those libraries that were wanting to transition, that we gave them their first $25 camera was on SWAN. The Topaz signatures we were able to work with Cersei Dynex and they used the existing hardware, so there wasn't new hardware that needed to be purchased for that. So we did have a few problems where there were some reported photos that were missing and signatures that were missing. Those were all reloaded, so we really achieved, I would say, 100% success with getting these images into the system. I'll touch on the fact that I was provided a couple examples of what was done. Not only were we dealing with the fact that the photos were going to migrate in, they had to be a certain size, and they actually had to be smaller than they were within the Millennium system. So we had real big challenges initially where when you're cropping a photo of a head and you're trying to make sure that you get the crop perfect, we were originally just resizing it, and so you would have a photo of a patron and their head would be a little tiny speck in the middle of it, and the signatures when resized also lost a significant amount of their the resolution. Consulting with Cersei Dynex, they had a guy who did his master's thesis on using photo recognition algorithms and was able to run it across our photo database, recognize when the face was in that area of the photo, and crop to around that face. So there were some where if the face was off center and such, that if you just tried to crop it a certain way, they ran it through and got it so that it would actually be much closer to the face of the patron. Same thing, we had to reduce this when we did the initial test data load. The photos looked horrible. The signatures look horrible. I would say right now they look very good. Are there libraries that are using these features that are happy with the way they've turned out?
Yeah.
Yes?
They're beautiful.
Beautiful, she says.
And I love the cropping, because when you're busy at the desk, you can take it and then not waste your time and have them fill out everything, and then you could crop it.
So you can crop it as you go within the Symphony. You couldn't do that in Millennium, right? It was like you took it and you crossed your fingers, you got it right.
Right, very grainy. And like I said, I had 2 of those $600.
Yeah, you did.
And now I have, like $25.
Yeah. Yeah, much more affordable.
Yes, and they're very quick.
Okay, good. Very happy with the way that went. All right, I mentioned this early at the start. We were having to also transition with this, within this migration a huge number of third-party vendors. We're calling this C.O.W. because essentially all the third-party integration within SWAN is being achieved prior with maybe what we call application programming interfaces, APIs, or C.O.W. We needed to coordinate with this large number of vendors. So there's 40 vendors, but some of the vendors offer more than one service, such as Comprise have Smart Money Manager. So really our IT staff, Stephen Schluitt, Ian Nosek, really worked with all these vendors, with all our libraries to make sure that everything was coordinated with the vendors. I think a third-party vendor, it is sort of a bear at times when you're talking with them and they maybe don't get back to you as fast as they would like, or you have a tech that doesn't understand what you're asking. And so we really tried to make sure that we worked as best as we could on your behalf to get everything transitioned over during that go-live week, and then did a lot of follow-up afterwards. I know Stephen and Ian were making sure that they were calling SWAN libraries to make sure that if they were still having any issues with self-checks or any other third-party applications, let us know. We can also work to get some of those cured. Stephen, there you put his hand up.
Aaron, I just want to mention Versal, Adam and Dan were
oh, yeah.
a huge help to us, and they pitched in.
Yeah, SWAN contracts with Versal CSI, and they were also involved in making sure that a lot of vendors were coordinated with us and setting up all the C.O.W. information. A part of the migration or the benefit of this new agreement with Cersei Dynex that we didn't have in the old agreement with Innovative was that C.O.W. licensing under Innovative was that every time you needed a C.O.W. license, I had to turn around and tell you that it cost you a license fee. We're unlimited in this case, so where we're headed right now with this is that every library in SWAN is essentially right now we're going to be working to make sure that you already have SIP2 configuration ready. So it's basically in there ready, and we'll just kind of hold it in reserve so that when you're ready to bring a vendor into a conversation and need to start that conversation, we basically have everything ready to go with you. So it'll make sure that as you're wanting to explore, and since we've sort of taken the lid off that it doesn't really cost you much, we fully expect that you're going to be approaching more vendors at your conferences that you go to, and we can accommodate that. Questions about all this vendor stuff. It was a huge, huge part of the migration that was kind of quietly going on, maybe not so quietly for some of you. Jeannie, Dilger.
So with the SIP2 then, for those of us who may already be using it, like with self-checks or RFID, and if we were to add another vendor, do we use that same SIP2 configuration, or would we need a separate one for separate vendors? How does that work?
Primarily use the same one.
So the information I already have, I can
Yeah.
put other vendors.
Steven's saying that it's going to vary a little bit, but whatever configuration you have should work with the other vendors. So, and we were adding all that SIP2 information in the director's login too. So you're like, what is that? What are my logins? You log into the director's area and you see what your SIP2 configuration is per your library. The vendors may not know. They say, well, I got a SWAN set up here that I did for LaGrange, and I'm going to do one for another library like Oak Lawn. I'll just use that same setup. It's different. We made it different logins per library. And the SIP2 has far more granularity with the Symphony SIP2 server than we ever had prior with the Millennium, meaning that we can really tweak it and say this SIP2 is going to be able to do checkout, or we can say it's read-only. It can just read the data and just return information. It can't alter data. So if we ever had a vendor and we're concerned, like, well, we don't want them to do this or that, and we can set it up that way.
And Aaron, I just want to mention, we're going to have an upcoming SWAN Tech, I believe June 17th, and we'll go really in depth with everything that we can do with our SIP connections and how we're configuring everything.
So SWAN Tech is a meeting that we have pretty much quarterly. So when we have the June quarterly, usually a few weeks after, we'll have maybe a SWAN Tech, depending on need. There were some issues after the go live with what we would call user categories in the Patron data. A lot of libraries had used what was called a P code 4. Patron code 4 is a category 4, and the Millennium record was used for sort of custom work to allow a patron to have access maybe to a computer that the reservation system would check and say the presence or absence of a yes or a no, or allow them in or not. There were some problems that we had encountered with this that were a little surprising. Some things about SIP2 that we wish we had learned ahead of time when we did all the setup. So it required us to do some quick flipping around where how many user categories are in Symphony? 12, thank you. Where we had originally had a lot of this data that was in the P code 4 Millennium, moved to category 11. SIP2 doesn't pass that over. It only goes up to the first 5, right? So we had to move this data over to category 4. Once we did that, some of the I'll call it a log jam with some of the vendors, such as like maybe Envisionware or TBS, we broke through after that, and they were able to set up the proper rules and authentication for your computer and your reservation systems. Questions about that? If you're still having lingering issues, certainly let us know. And again, Stephen and Ian have been very active in trying to reach out to libraries to find out if anyone was living with a problem and not authenticating and had just said it's hopeless, I'm never going to get this right, that we could certainly get it working for you. I think it should all be working by now. I'd be surprised. Okay? All right, indexes. Definitely, this was a big part of the migration that, with a lot of data changes that were occurring after our go live, we did have some issues that also occurred with the indexes. I'm going to break this up into 2 slides, or I have broken up into 2 slides. Enterprise indexing, of course, was affected. It actually was affected on 2 days, the 28th and the 30th. It did, unfortunately, occur during business hours. A really bad time, I would say, to affect libraries in their work. It also wasn't timely when they were also battling some indexing issues over on the Symphony side. So staff that were having trouble doing searches in Symphony were going to Enterprise to do some searches, and then Enterprise basically was returning really no listed library identification and no status. So you were really dead in the water for that period. That said, after the 30th and in the 25 days that we've been up on Enterprise, Enterprise for the most part has been very, very stable. I would say being down 2% of the possible time is pretty good. I would like to come back and tell you over the next 25 days that this will be 100% uptime. That said, we're still battling some issues within Enterprise, specifically with, we'll say, iPad tablet users. Maybe hard to see this here, but I'll tell you what this is. This is coming from our Google Analytics. It's showing the active the platform that current users have been using since their go live, which is primarily showing, of course, Windows-based operating systems are the lion's share of them, representing 80%. The iOS Apple tablet platform or mobile devices is 8%. So we have been dealing with some iPad tablet issues. The first problem that we had to deal with was that when we added library logos in there, some were too big and they were blocking the ability to click on the login, which was very frustrating. We had to correct that. And we're also battling when the keyboard pops up when you're trying to log in. Patrons are struggling to battle with that. And I think portrait, is it landscape it's okay? Or is it either one it's bad? Either one it's bad. We have a fix in the works for that as well that will correct that so the login screen will stay up. These users probably, I'm guessing, are very vocal, although they're a small subset of the users, but we're aware of this. I think we've said all along that Enterprise was not really meant to be what we'll call responsive web design, but certainly it does work okay as an Enterprise application, and some aspects of it we were monitoring and aware of, but we're working to make it better. And we have some flexibility as far as being able to do some testing with our profiles and tweak library settings individually. Questions about Enterprise at this point before I move on to the Symphony indexes? I think that there are some indexing questions. Maybe after I talk about that, we can talk a little bit about some of the searching. Symphony Searches. We had a lot of data changes with item records particularly that were affected, which were affecting searching. Here's that list I shared with you already about all these fixes that we had to push through. Really, by the 23rd of April, we had about 200,000 records that had been repaired that needed to go through the indexing process. The indexing process that we had initially set up was more designed, let's say, for routine operations. So many records get added into the system or changed throughout the day. The overnight processes that are designed to accommodate the index or deal with the index or dynamic indexing were essentially a little overwhelmed by the sheer number. So we were trying to work on this by chunking out this 200,000 that needed to be reindexed in blocks of 20,000. But it was clear that it was taking too long, meaning that trying to do 20,000 a night was really hampering your staff ability to search, place holds, just perform really effectively for public service staff, particularly with Symphony. We came in pretty much after that weekend and had a big meeting with Cersei Dynas, a conference call over the phone. They brought in a lot of their engineers, a lot of their database engineers, and that understood how the indexing worked, and came back with a proposal at the end of the day, and everything was fixed in one night. So we weren't having to wait over a period of nights to get the indexing done. They came up with a strategy to get it all done in one night. And what we learned from that also is that we've put in some indexing processes now that are really optimal for large consortia site. As we continue to do catalog cleanup or do mass changes, this system should be able to really handle that. That said, we're always going to be keeping an eye on this and how the searching is performing. Let me stop right there. We can talk about some enterprise searching issues that you had, maybe Symphony searching issues as well. We did just complete a class. It was an online class that Rebecca Malinowski, our Special Projects Coordinator, conducted on May 6th. It was fairly well attended, but it was also recorded, so if you couldn't attend it live, you can watch it. It's posted on our support site. It's probably one of the things you can see right on our front page. And it focused solely really on Symphony searching. Yes, Jeannie Dilger. Feedback on the searching is...
My staff came back and raved about it. I came back. I mean, they took it in the library. But it was the timing, I think, was what was key, was that they had been using Symphony for a number of weeks, so they sort of had become more comfortable with it. They knew what they could do and what they hadn't figured out how to do. So it was really...
All right, good timing there. All right, thanks for sharing that. We kind of knew that you were going to have a quick class that we needed to just sort of reorient all the staff to that. So if you missed it, again, there's a video that's on our site that you can watch. Just like this meeting will be recorded as well. Other feedback? Getting the hang of searching? Are the ebooks that are in there causing you more trouble than they're worth? No? You like having the ebooks loaded in there? Okay. I see a few heads nodding yes. All right. Oh, sure.
Title and keyword searches are still producing lots of false hits.
In terms of the Symphony searching? Yeah, I think that the class, if it wasn't clear when I sat through the class, and I learned also some strategies for that too, in terms of how staff need to be able to use some of the searching. As far as title keyword, there's also marked maps that we can take a look at. Maybe there's certain areas of the bib record, perhaps, that we need to tweak. Can I follow up with you, Rick, on that with any of your staff you want me to talk with, or? All right, we'll talk post. I'll put keyword search. Up until this migration, Sheila, sorry.
I just wanted to say that I found advanced search to be much easier to use.
The advanced search within the Symphony system? Very good. Okay. Sheila was expressing that the advanced search within the Symphony was very, very helpful, much easier to use. And we'll continue to offer more classes along those lines as we're getting feedback as far as what's needed. And of course, doing more online classes seems to be working, and recording them. A lot of the work up until the migration and a lot of the ILS selection process was really with SWAN was like really building what I'll call a solid foundation to deal with the sort of complexity of the change of our ILS, such as putting in a ticket system that all SWAN staff use and that we orient library staff to use. Building a whole support site that's built around Drupal and has a lot of features and the ability to quickly add content and allow that content to be searched. The ticket system was just absolutely vital, I would say, from the SWAN staff side, about trying to organize all the requests that were coming in, prioritize them, and be able to see what the issues are that are out there, or the questions that are out there. The graph here shows that the tickets that were coming in are, of course, our biggest spike was the 14th, the day of our go live. It was close to 200 tickets were opened up that day. And it ebbs and flows. A little bit, the troughs here are more weekends where we're not seeing a lot of tickets coming in, even though we were scheduling staff to monitor tickets and have issues reported, being able to work with them. The blue line is showing that as your tickets are coming in, that we're responding and closing them as quickly as we can. Of course, there are times where maybe we'll introduce a new feature or element, such as we're kicking off a new process with holds as far as like clear hold shelf and such, and that will typically involve in a spike, or we'll say, give us your feedback on some issue of what we're rolling out. And so we'll have a spike and we'll have to have staff respond to those. But overall, I didn't include in here, overall the number of tickets coming in is sort of basically trending down, and the level of tickets being closed is sort of trending this way. When we catch a break, where we can get really caught up, you'll see like towards the end of last week, we really were closing out a lot of tickets that were more or less follow-up, where we didn't hear back from staff, or staff were replying back like, thank you for fixing that, and then we'd say, great, and we'd close out the ticket. So 78% closed at this point. We'll continue to work and deal with remaining issues. Some of these are unfortunately related to some issues that a number of tickets, for example, could be closed all at once we have a case that we've opened up with Cersei Dynex resolved. So we'll see a number closed. Ann Kozak, you had a question.
Yes. If staff submits a ticket and they are told that the problem will be fixed by mapping, my question is this mapping specific to your library, or are we waiting for some, specifically there were some fines and loan periods I talked about. Is it a specific fix that has to be run for Thomas Ford, or is this some SWAN-wide fix, or I'm just not clear like when that would be mapped.
I don't have a full answer for you. Is there someone, Kate, are you putting your hand up? Come on up to the front. Yeah, they want to see you on camera.
Okay, so, I have to be mic'd too.
Well, just hold it for our people, our friends online.
Thanks. Hi, friends online. To answer your question about mapping, Ann, primarily what we're doing now is tweaking individual library lines to bring everything, into exactly what you want and need at your library. So if there's anybody out there that still has a couple of small issues, usually we can tweak the mapping and resolve that pretty quickly. It's just a matter of having the time to sit down and go into the maps and do it all. So it might not be, it might not be overnight, but we'll get to it. Okay?
And typically the mapping, thank you, Kate.
You're welcome.
It's Kate Boyle, SWAN Member Service Manager. Typically when we do these changes, we'll let you know that it'll go into place the following day, because a lot of these configuration changes require what's called a halt run of Symphony or a restart of Symphony, and those are scheduled to occur every night. Feedback on the way the ticket system's been working. Have you been happy, unhappy with the way it's performed? Good, happy? A lot of heads nodding yes, happy? All right, good. Like I said, it was our lifeline to really managing everything that was coming in, and there was a lot of things coming in. Back when I was dealing with a lot of more investigation as far as open source solutions in the library field, open source in general has a phrase that they use that it's basically to the effect that the more eyes you have looking at something, the shallower your bugs are, meaning that the more people are looking at something, the problems that you have aren't as huge. You may have little problems. So I think that as we transition from the testing environment into the live environment, there were far more people looking at it, and we, of course, encountered and saw a lot of little things that just weren't right, or some big things that weren't right. And responding via the ticket system allowed us to immediately see what they are, kind of group them together, and then we were just wiping out problems fairly quickly, that first week and the second week. So kudos to your staff. We had a ton of training that had gone on. Kate provided me this number of 2,334 staff. areas where we got started with Mentor, and then of course circulation, cataloging, serials, enterprise, and also some classes for IT. These are just sort of general ballpark numbers here. And they started in November with Mentor and went all the way up to the go live for cataloging staff. I was seeing cataloging coming into SWAN Burridge, into the training lab, all the way up until basically the week before. So BIB services staff, thank you for working with them on that. I'll share some part of that training experience is, at least from the cataloging, I think it applies to a lot of other areas of the library. There could potentially be someone coming in that works in technical services or does processing at their library, and they come in and they're like, I'm going to get training, and here's the process from A to Z, and this is how it works. And then they're sitting in a room full of 14 other people, and they go, well, my process is this, and my process is this, not realizing that there's 15 people there, and every library has a different way of doing things. And so the training was more about giving you the tools you needed to be able to see how to develop the workflow and the process. That said, we know that there's a lot of what you do that is changing behind the scenes. Some say for the better, some are like, oh, it's more clicks to do certain things, and potentially that's what it will be. And when I get to the end of my presentation, I'll touch on the fact that we do have some big staff client changes that are going to be coming with their Blue Cloud staff client. Cersei Dynamics support was pretty dynamite, I would say, throughout. They were monitoring our situation in Lehi, Utah. At some point, I was sitting next to our consultant pretty much throughout the 4 days that she was on site. And during a moment where I was talking to him, I said, like, do we need to put any big calls in as far as the whole thing? She said, oh no, everybody there in Lehi knows what's going on with SWAN. So they were really, really active and aware of it. I think there was a lot of lead up to that we also worked on. Rich and I did have a meeting with them during one of the conferences here, the midwinter conference for ALA that was in town. Had a sit-down meeting with them and said, here's how it's going to go. You're going to pay attention to us, and enterprise has to work like a charm. So I would say right now, fingers crossed, it's been pretty stable since we got those 2 bad indexing problems licked. They also have what's your new acronym here, SAS. Does anyone know what that means? SAAS? Jeannie, of course you know. Put your hand down. Somebody else. No, Rudy in the back. No, you're working IT. Software as a service. It's another way of calling hosting. So our enterprise system is all hosted by Cersei Dynamics. So they have a whole team called their SAS team that was looking at the way enterprise was performing throughout, and if there were issues, they would swoop in and fix them. And we could not have done this without you all. I would say my observations throughout this was that library staff, when they were calling and checking in on things or asking, when they were calling in on issues, they were always aware of, we were all in this together. As probably as frustrating as it could have been, and maybe there were things that maybe we didn't get right and you wanted to yell at us, certainly you could yell at us and tell us that it's a major issue. But I think the overall feeling that I was getting and that a lot of us were feeling is that we all kind of rallied together and made sure that we were going to move forward on this together. There were staff that thought when you submit a ticket that results in a phone call 5 seconds later. We had to adjust some of that. There were some calls I put into libraries about certain issues that we were having. And then we were working together sort of in a customized way, I'll say, as far as dealing with issues. And we were checking in with libraries throughout as far as libraries that had submitted a lot of tickets and talking to them about some of the tickets that they had. That holds fix that we had on Friday, we know was a really big deal. And we thank you all for helping us with that. Getting towards the end here, the ebook integration with eResource Central really has been quite stable throughout, so that's good news as far as how it integrates with enterprise. Rebecca wanted me to make sure, since she has been more our primary person focusing on eResource Central and enterprise, it's a little hard to read that, but as explained to me, is that if you look at stats in Overdrive, you're going to see a spike in new users that are using Overdrive, and it's actually basically a dupe. You're seeing
Everyone is new.
everyone using it in enterprise is new, even though they may have been using it before. So you're probably seeing a surge in stats. Is that okay? Stats going up? Patron notification, I want to touch on this, that we did get the text messaging going the week after our go live on the 21st, so we went live on the 14th, and the text notification started up that following Tuesday. The first day we did have, and I'll go through the timing of it, patrons that may have gotten a text notification also got an email. We corrected that that evening, and the next day, if they got a text notification, they weren't also getting a duplicate email. So that also started the same day. Printed notices are all coming out from SWAN directly, which made Rails and the State Library very happy. And billing notices also started just this month. May 6th is when we enable that. It's text, email, and print. I included a slide, and the next slide here for you all is more, I think, helpful just to sort of ready for conversation I want to have with you about reports and statistical reports that we're working on. So when we do notification, the text courtesy notice and the text overdue notices go out first. They go out around 8:30 in the morning. And then email courtesy follows up after that, and then the email overdue notices come right out after. So it's basically looking to see the order, which is text, email, and then anything that's not going out there we're dealing with in print, centrally printing. After that, then we're texting the bill notice out, and then we've got email bills also going out, and then we also print. Then we have hold pickup notices go out via text and email. You'll probably note there's no blue wedge there for print hold pickup notices. We've never printed those, mostly because the timeliness of a hold pickup notice in the mail just didn't make sense to send those out. And I included the times in here. And these were recently adjusted, so I think what we'll be highlighting this in our support site, because I think library staff want to become familiar with when are these going out. Questions about this? No? Okay. We've also asked that you go to our support site and manage your Aliased email notice. This should be accessible to library directors to make a change, or if you've delegated that to staff, they should be able to go in and do that. Patron notices are being sent from your local library. And some of this is just more limitations within Symphony. I don't know how many of you have been told that the bounce messages, you're not going to be seeing those as you were before, but we don't have an option to capture the bounce. Question, Jamie?
Well, my question is, Cersei Dynex, is this something, do they ever plan to provide this, or has there been discussion with them about this?
A discussion or a plan to provide this as far as with dealing with bounces. This is a tricky solution that could be part of IT and also could be part of the member services dealing with Symphony configuration. I don't know. I don't have an answer for you, Jamie. But let me just say that we know that everyone was used to that and had a process for dealing with that. So I'd like to say we'll continue to investigate it. The good news is also we have a lot of consortia nearby that we've been working with that were very helpful throughout this process leading up to the go live, and also have been helpful throughout, and that we will run some questions by them, and they'll give us some quick answers as well as far as how we're configuring things. Continue to ask for help. If you're thinking like, well, I think they know about this issue, go ahead and report it. It may be part of what I call building a case, especially if we see a couple good examples of something that's occurring, and then I can then work with our staff here and say, yeah, there's a definite issue that's going on here. We're transitioning from sort of a project management with our go live into the full support with Cersei Dynex. That said, that we're in a transition phase with them. called Sure Start. Statistical reports. This seems to be the biggest issue that we're now kind of getting questions in from library staff, particularly at the end of April and getting to the beginning of the month. There were people that were like, I really want good numbers of the 2 weeks that we were circulating on Symphony. And I would say, I don't think I would really trust those stats too much anyway, because when you go through a migration, your stats are always going to look a little odd, especially in those first 2 weeks. That said, there are a lot of statistical reports that we're still working on. There are a lot of reasons that, one, we didn't provide a lot of training prior to the go live on this that we're going to be providing soon. Let's just say we're going to be looking at doing more training on statistical reporting in June. Also that when you're making all these data changes and your database is kind of churning through waves of data changes, the reports that you're going to generate aren't going to be very accurate because you're always changing the data and the underlying maybe structure of the data. Symphony reporting, when we say reports in Symphony, it's a big umbrella category for a lot of other things, meaning that reports in Symphony are what we also use to schedule all the notification I showed you. So basically you create a report which is like a task that it needs to follow, and then it's run on a schedule. Also managing overnight process such as the indexing process that it's indexing. That's all managed by Symphony reports. So we reports area of Symphony, and they're running some reports. They're experimenting and playing around, and we've been having to basically call up and check in with those library staff if they have a report that seems to be running over an hour. We're able to see, like, you've probably not efficiently, so it's like maybe doing a query across 8 million items where basically you needed to do a different kind of query. So we've taken some steps where we tell them we're going to cancel running and we'll work with you on that. That said, I know there's a lot of questions now that have been coming in, next wave of tickets and such. We sort of knew that all along, that we were going to reach this point. And maybe I should have done more to state that all along throughout the migration process, that we had known that we weren't going to do a lot of training on it up until post-go live, so just know that we're aware of that and it's coming. So here's where we're at with this. Staff got together and we were talking about the issues as they stand right now. Library staff right now, when they go into the reports area of reports section of Symphony workflows, they're going to see a lot of reports or their reports that are assigned to their library in the template folder. That's how we're going to kind of structure it for now. Staff, we're going to encourage staff to work within a window of 9 to 6 p.m. And all this is going to be sent out via a memo. I wanted to introduce this topic to you here and get questions. The Symphony system, it has a restart right before 10 o'clock at night. So it would actually kill any reports that are running late into the night, because then there's a lot of like kind of overnight activity that also kicks off. We're still going to keep an eye on reports. If they're running for very long periods, such as 20 minutes, we may cancel those reports running centrally by staff, and we'll try to check in with you as far as your staff that may have been running it. I promise you there's going to be more library staff training in this area. And I think that is going to be just something that everyone's going to be very excited to get. One of the things that I maybe skipped out over here is Blue Cloud Analytics is something that we did get access to, that I want to say SWAN staff got access to it. It was almost like 2 weeks before the go live. It was right before the go live, probably in March. So there really wasn't a big opportunity to dive into it. And also, Cersei Dynex's rollout of analytics is that they're not giving you the option to have all your data in there at once. It's sort of limited right now. There's some circulation patron data in there now. About a month later, they added MARC data that's being harvested. Then they're going to continue to add other data elements into this. So what we're dealing with is sort of a rollout of analytics. So when we start to show this to you, you may see like, oh, there's some reports in here that are going to work beautifully for this area of my library, but maybe not others. So we're going to have to bridge that as far as there may be some customized reports that we create within Symphony to get you some of those stats. We also have consulting time with Search Dynamics to build custom reports as well. That was always part of the agreement, that if we needed to get into this and do a lot of custom reports, that was part of it. And even if we start to eat into that a lot, there's an hourly rate that we negotiated, half the rate that would normally be within their custom programming rate as far as for building reports than they would normally charge a customer. So we made sure to look out for you on that front, that if we need to build certain things, we could work on that. Let me stop right here. Tell me what your staff are telling you about reports and data. Mary Beth.
I just have a question. So realistically, do you think my IPLAR statistics will stop April 10th? Or will, anything we go from the 14th to the 30th will be?
Your question is your,
Our FFY ends April 30th.
because you were looking at, here's the stats I had in Millennium. I would look at what last April looked like and just add a percentage to it. I mean, it's really,
I'm not above doing that.
you all know that the IPLAR stats, there's no one going over them with a magnifying glass. Do you know that?
If your
Well,
goes down.
Yeah, I know. It's true. I shouldn't speak too lightly about it. Yeah. This is going to get better. As I walked you through all the data that came out of Millennium and into Symphony, you see that there was a ton of data. And we're sort of have it mostly organized at this point, and we're going to continue to work on it and get you those stats. We hear most often from staff, they're like, where's our IC1 stats? How come you couldn't migrate those? And there just was no equivalent in the system for that. But that said, we are going to be working to try to get stats that are similar to that out of the system. Something like that. You may not have a one-to-one, but you are going to get some stats that are going to help you with collection development and dig into areas of like adult and juvenile collections. Jamie, you had a question?
I think that's a really key thing, obviously, for staff, understanding the way our circulation moves up and down and what's being used, what's not being used,
Sure.
et cetera. I mean, so that's really crucial to us, also for weighting purposes, ordering, things like that. I also think those of us on self-check, obviously that's important to understand what our patrons are doing online, what they're doing with the self-check, and then obviously.
Yeah, Jamie's bringing up as far as like the ability to do a collection analysis for weeding, self-check stats as far as that, and then patron usage online. We do have other things that we're employing, such as Google Analytics as far as for online patron usage,
For
but
us, we look at self-service, for our patrons, not just our self-check machine, but what are they doing online in terms of renewal, for example?
exactly, okay,
So getting that type of statistic.
okay.
Fines paid, revenue reports for us, we have revenue lines that, are broken out in different ways.
Yeah, revenue lines, yeah,
When they pay online.
Yep.
Things like that. So, part of it is, to my mind, I'm sort of thinking about, well, we could analyze our statistics and see what do we use them for? How
That-
they help us run our library to make sure they're important to us. Obviously that's a good thing to do.
We've been saying that, and that's one that I really, it's sort of like tough to get up here and say like, you should have that existential moment and be like, why do I need this stat? It doesn't feel like it's in my place to say that, but at some point or other, there is a point at which you're like, I think that there's libraries that are like, I have a board report, I have this box, I need to put that number in there, and I can't get that number at the moment. But then there could also be, from us just saying, it's going to take a little bit for us to give you that number specifically, but also maybe you need to have a conversation and find out, do you really read over all these stats? Does your board really read them over? Or is it showing you some continuity throughout, so you're doing some sort of deeper analysis over time? I acknowledge that. I like to see these stats as far as from the SWAN kind of consortia holistically, to see how we're doing in terms of circulation and the number of items that we have. So I hear you.
We did find from Centec that the machines themselves can generate reports.
Most self-check machines have some sort of data statistical recording. You may need to follow up and find out what is involved in that. A lot of them log, too. Other questions about the stats. This outline sound fairly reasonable to you? You're going to be able to run them within a window.
You're aware of what we need for, I know the IPLAR, but you're aware of the breakouts?
Kate Boyle used to teach classes on IPLAR stats as far as Millennium, so I think she's got it. Yeah. Yeah, she's going to look over what IPLARs look like, and we'll go from there. There's been I don't mean to try to minimize it, but there's been a lot at this point because we've been able to shift from this sort of war footing into this area of stats of the month, and everyone's like, my stats. You know, they really, really wanted to. We got our quarterly coming up. Some of the next round of solutions, of course, that we'll be talking about is SVA and Blue Cloud Commerce. I've already talked about analytics, but we also got mobile search that we're going to need to dive into. There's been some work already going on with BookMine. The BookMine Plus is the customized version that's going to be made on a per library basis. And when I have classes here, I mean training classes that we'll offer to you. I outlined this last March, and that as we head towards the June meeting, which is June 4th, that we will give you updates on all these areas, but then we'll also continue to sort of break out a lot of the things that we are going to be providing you that were all part of this big Aliased migration and what the negotiation for this, all these suite of services is basically the best way to describe it from Symphony Dynamics when you're going to start getting these. Some of this is more going all the way out to December in terms of being able to do more with like portfolio, and I think that there's some technical things your IT staff would be really interested in, but also like things like social library, which is the Facebook integration, that will also be targeting that. So there's a lot we're going to be working on. I think that some of the ones that are most interested in, such as the pilot as far as with SVA, we're going to be working with one library specifically on that. That's the robocalling. So your staff won't have to necessarily make phone calls, that patrons will be able to work with that. Blue Cloud Commerce, as far as credit card swipes, looking to do some pilot with a specific library on that as well to get you that. Jim Dieter, question.
With the credit cards, have you heard anything more about the chip cards and all that and the swipes?
No, not specifically. His question is that there's the payment card industry, at least with the United States. I think that there was a lot of concern with all the data breaches that have occurred with swipe and moving to what's called chip and PIN, which is that there's a chip embedded in the card. This is part of the reason why we were delaying getting the swipes out, waiting till September, because we'll have a better sense of what changes that are coming that are supposedly going to be introduced maybe later in the year. Justin Swain, who was out for this discussion back, it was at December, I think. I think he answered questions for an hour about this. He said mostly that the swipes that you have will still be good. It's more that will we have devices that can do both. I would say would be where we're headed. There were some library staff that said, how come I didn't get my swipe right now? And it was more like, those are coming. Those are going to be more talked about at the September quarterly as far as being able to do swipes. That said, there's plenty of self-check systems out there that some of you may be using where you have a swipe right now that's communicating back. So did I see a hand going up? Jamie? Yeah.
Another topic or question. Is there going to be a Blue Cloud circulation? I heard.
Yeah. Yeah, Jamie's asking about the Blue Cloud staff client. Right here is Blue Cloud cataloging. That was the first element of a whole new revamp of the staff client that they got started with Symphony Dynamics. The end game with this migration, I hate to tell you this, 25 days out, was not that we'd love to be on the Symphony Workflows client. The end game is that we like the fact that they're developing a new staff client and they have a process called Strategic Partnership Program that we're going to really start introducing you all to, which means that as they're building these new clients or these new initiatives that they have the opportunity that all their customers can participate in them, or that those that participate, they have a list of things that you're required to do as a participant, such as you go into their beta site, you do some work, you provide feedback, constructive feedback. That was, I think, a big part of what we liked about the Symphony Dynamics choice, was that they had this, because too often it was when they released the beta, we'd say, the beta is fine. I wish I had been involved before the beta, before you even got this far with it, to provide you feedback on things that you missed or didn't get right. That program is how that's done. Other presentations I've showed you that roadmap where they have all these iterative releases of these various pieces of their software suite, where they'll do updates quite frequently to various parts of the system. So if we catch something and it's not right, it's almost certain that we may get something fixed within 30 days, possibly, if it's part of their Blue Cloud system. We are encountering some issues right now with Blue Cloud Commerce. There have definitely been tickets that have been coming in from libraries about that. I didn't develop a slide on this, but I have opened several cases on this with Symphony Dynamics. So they do have that in with their engineers and their development team. And we're going to have instructions coming out to you all, some guidance on this, because what you'll have is a patron that paid online and didn't take it off their record. Yeah, Kathy McSwain is looking at me. Yeah. So when you give me really good details saying this patron did this, here's the ProPay email, and it occurred on this date, I can assemble like a lock-solid example for them, and they'll go back, the engineers will go back and look to see exactly what happened in that moment, and they'll go, this happened at this moment for this reason. We're going to target a software fix for it. So I don't have an answer as far as for that, but I'm going to give you some guidance on, like, when you encounter this situation, what do you do? You know, do you refund them? What do you do? How do you do that in ProPay? That kind of stuff. It's kind of a new environment for us to. We used to do it all centrally, and now you're all doing it on your own. And I realized, like, oh, what we used to do centrally, now we have to train you all on 77 different ways of doing this. So, Jamie.
Another quick question. So when they're moving into the Blue Cloud world, what about the searching and workflows that the reference staff do, for example? Will there be something new coming down the road for that, do we know? Or will they, just as far as we know, they'll just keep using workflows?
No, I think what we're going to start to see, and staff would have to correct me, I don't know if there's anything like a staff searching and hold module that's in the works within the Blue Cloud staff. I haven't seen staff, no, not yet.
I don't know if that's part of Blue Cloud Search. I was like contemplating holds.
Yeah.
One thing I have heard that was announced at C.O.W. In March is that they are working on a change to the way enterprise works. I mean, it could still be like 2 years out, but it will basically be a more direct connection like Webpack was, and they'll do away with the harvest system that a lot of people have been sending tickets in. Like, why isn't my data showing up? And
Right.
it'll be there in 3 hours.
So
That's
where this is headed, what Rebecca was also noting, is that as they're developing these Blue Cloud staff systems, and the way we're dealing with this currently is that OPACs will maybe have their own indexes, like a keyword index, and then Symphony may have its own, and you'll do a search in each and go, these are inconsistent. I'm getting back different results, where maybe you weren't seeing that before because maybe the data, the indexes were shared by both the OPAC and the staff client. That was actually a very, very important thing that was noted as far as when we were embarking on this Aliased search, that we wanted to have more similar searching experience for staff and for the public. I will say it definitely seems that it's headed that way with what Symphony Dynamics is doing, that they're building cloud-based searching, and it's going to be a little bit more similar, hopefully, to what your patrons are searching, with more options for staff. That touches on this. This was 2 years ago, before we started this Aliased search. We did this big survey that completed in April 2013. And we asked them to rank these 10 criteria Jeannie Dilger was my co-chair on that. You probably remember that when we were doing this survey, we got a lot of feedback. I think when I was looking back on this, I was already happy to see that some of the things already 25 days out were headed in the right direction. Seamless and easy offline system, while ranked 9th, is something that we definitely, I believe we got out of the new system, and we really hammered home to use the offline and not get in the habit of not using the offline system. Notifications via phone, email, and text. As you can see that we've already started that text notification being up and running. We've got some other bib and item manipulation tools in the works. I can say that, Karen, right? In the works. There's some group editing tools that those of you that were maybe familiar with the Horizon environment called Item Group Editor, there's something similar to that. Also, we're going to do some training for you all, that maybe an online class where we're going to maybe give you an overview of the Symphony Dynamics support portal. We've mostly opened it up to you without a lot of overview on that, but we're going to give you some guidance on how to use it. Because there's a lot in there that you can find, but also there's a lot in there that can confuse you. Like some staff has said, well, I did all these classes on eLibrary and was looking at Horizon, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no. You don't look at eLibrary, you don't look at Horizon. Here are the areas that we need to have you focus on. That said, there's a lot of great stuff in there. So we're really kind of opening up their support site for you all to get in there and see a lot of the thorough documentation. That said, the online documentation, and also that's available when you're in a context search within Symphony and you need to hit F1, it'll open up the web page connected to that area of the Symphony system you're in. And also the online instructions with Enterprise are actually pretty good as well. And number one, I think there was a lot of unhappiness with maybe some of the stability within the Millennium environment. We are going to work very hard to make sure that as we're emerging out of this transition period, that things are going to really remain consistent and the response time remain high. I didn't have a slide on this, but our servers throughout all this process performed flawlessly. There were no issues with the servers that we are running everything on. And let me tell you, it's running 5 ILS servers right now. Still has your Millennium system, your Millennium reports, and your test. And it has your Symphony production and a Symphony test system. You don't have access to the Symphony test system, so what we have is something that is very good, has scaled very nicely for our needs. And so I'm happy to say that was never an issue throughout. I don't even report on it because it's just performed great. So kudos to our IT staff for making sure that that worked. And we really, really drove it home for Symphony Dynamics that the enterprise had to be fast and that they had enough resources allocated to it. It's not maybe as blazing, as immediately fast as Webpack, but it's still, I think, acceptably fast in terms of bringing back results. You may not get sometimes the results you want. I'm looking at Stacy. Stacy and I were having conversations. Stacy Whitman at Eisenhower, we were talking about some of the searching inconsistencies. So she's going to give me some examples of some of the things that she was seeing searching in Symphony and why or why not certain results were coming back. It's all about data and indexes, and we can tweak as much of that as we can. That's at the end. It's 11 o'clock. Open it up for discussion. We can throw out some questions you have. We'll do our best to answer them now. I've got staff here in the room. We got online staff. Stephen, are there questions coming in over the chat? None? Are there people watching on the chat? Yeah? Okay. Tiffany.
I have 2 quick questions.
2 quick questions.
One is, you had mentioned working with Stacy and I and how about the Chicago patrons.
Yeah.
We're doing our own fix too, so if we can hear or be involved or talk, that would be great. I don't know if we're doing the same kind of fix.
I don't think we are.
Okay.
I think pretty much absolutely knocking those posts.
And similarly, you had mentioned acquisitions at all, and so we are still waiting for our staff to get their first orders in for the year. yet, but if we could find out who the other people are on acquisitions, I know it's a small group, but maybe we can form our own little confab and help support.
Sure. I know they've made a lot of headway with acquisitions and getting orders to go through. There's also, as part of that vendor integration, there's that complex part of it. The acquisitions process also relies on Symphony reports. So we were dealing with that, and then we were kind of battling with, there's some statistical reports that were running long that were also getting in the way of some of these acquisition reports. So I'm making note that we'll work on that. As far as CPL, you know, a lot of what we had done in the past as far as with CPL patrons, you know, we may have to explore some things that, you know, we've thought like, well, we never allowed them to place holds online. Maybe we need to consider that. And it may actually help a lot with some of this, or allow it in a very somewhat limited way. How many CPL patrons roughly you have? I know Eisenhower, you're top of the list because you're surrounded on all four sides by Chicago. So it's big, but other CPL? Yeah, Blue Island.
Several hundred, I would think. And I mean, mostly our fix is not ideal, but what it's doing is not letting us keep track of how many total holds they have. So I guess we're breaking the rule of CPL, who wants to
Yeah,
limit.
yeah.
So are we open to criticism about, or open to
All right.
whatever?
Kate's listening in on this. I think I'm making note. We can huddle up more about this and sort of unpack what you're doing and what we can figure out for the non kind of SWAN member library patrons and how they're working. Other questions, feedback?
I was going to say, we've suggested too about creating these forums. You and I have an initial talk about like how to get a forum going for all of us so that we start to have some commonality.
Yeah, there's always been some, what Rich is referring to is maybe starting to do some maybe online forums or things like that to allow like acquisitions folks to network more. There's pros and cons to those. And there is, but also I'm aware of how these work. Like an example of the CCS consortia, they end up, I think they have like maybe 20 forums, and then it also ends up being that all the consortia staff have to monitor every one of them, and they're always weighing in on like, no, what you're saying is completely wrong. You know, here's how it needs to be done. So I think it's coming. There'll be something coming, but I'm not sure exactly when, and we'll have to figure out what. Other questions? Jamie Bukovac.
I'd like to second that. I mean, maybe the forum isn't the right thing. Maybe it's a user group that meets quarterly or something. But I know, like Ann was saying, some of the things she picked up, my head of tech services, was that just understanding a process or learning about a process that someone else is doing.
Sure.
You know, here's how we decided to use this new feature of Cersei Dynex. And you talked about everyone doing everything differently.
Yeah.
So to at least organize the group, an acquisitions group to meet, or maybe every other month or something.
Yeah, we have the acquisitions user group. Just a reminder, we do have an AC users group. We have the circulation advisory group, cataloging users group. Those weren't as active, mostly because a lot of the stuff in Millennium was sort of mature and worked out. We, staff centrally, have always said that there's probably going to be much more activity in this here on out. We're probably talking for the next 5 years where these groups will be meeting more often to share and discuss, like, did you run into this or run into that? So I don't have specific dates on when these user groups are going to meet. Brandy Overby is raising her hand. What is your contribution?
If you could reiterate the questions that are being asked for those who are watching online.
So there's the discussion right now is mostly about having staff user groups and trying to just make sure everyone's aware that we do have user groups that have been established, but they probably haven't had meetings set yet, mostly because we're just catching our breath. But I think we'll utilize those as well and maybe explore some networking opportunities. Mary Beth, question.
When that indexing issue came up, I noticed when we were checking in new books that I knew things were online and they weren't coming up in workflows, but they were on Enterprise. So it occurred to me, oh boy, there's going to be duplicate entries for stuff because people are going to go ahead and put a pre-CAD on or whatever, and now they're starting to surface. So I love that form that's on the SWAN support site where you can report the duplicate entries, because they are every day.
Okay.
I'm finding them and sending them, and they're fixing them.
When we had that indexing issue, just to repeat for everyone and online, is that staff couldn't search properly and say, well, does this item already exist, or do I need to create a new pre-CAT? And the answer was like, just put the pre-CAT in and get the item out. And as we're encountering, if there's a duplicate, library staff are, as they encounter them, we have an online form that you fill out, and we see those come into our ticket system. So we see those come in every day, and those are then getting processed by BIBS services staff here to merge them, and it's pretty fast. So thank you for bringing that up. Jeannie Dilger.
A while back, there was a moratorium on any changes to loan rules, those sorts of things. And my staff are starting to see, as we expected, like with Pick Up Anywhere, some reasons to make some changes. For instance, all of my neighborhood libraries evidently check out new books for 14 days. We check them out for 7 days. So my patrons are better off placing a hold on something, choosing to pick it up at LaGrange Park, because they would get it for 14 days if they picked it up there. So we're realizing that we need to revisit our loan rules and maybe be more liberal, let our things go out, that sort of thing. Have you thought about timeline-wise when we'll be able to start making those kinds of changes?
Yeah, there's a queue that member services had been building for a lot of these requests. I don't have something specific to tell you, other than we're also, we recognize within SWAN, the staff here, that we need to essentially be reviewing these and prioritizing these as well, because some of them are going to be much more urgent and others are maybe less so. Every library situation is different, so sometimes we're having to deal with, oh, I have this event that's coming up, and I need to have this ready by this event, and that kind of, we'll work with you on that. So Pick Up Anywhere and the enterprise profiles have just thrown a whole interesting curveball on this. You know, good and bad. I don't want to say bad, but it has just definitely changed a lot of the way we've thought about the way we've loaned things and circulated. So, yes.
So is the answer that we should go ahead and submit those?
Kate. Send in a ticket. Yeah.
For it, we may not get it right away if it's not. Okay, then we can go ahead and
Yes, that's your best way. If you email us, you know, we put it in a queue. That way it means that we've seen it. We had a big moratorium on staff here being able to take any time off because we were dealing with this. And so I've likened myself as like kind of the NBA coach. I'm like, okay, you're on the bench, you're resting, you're in. So the ticket system allows us also to monitor and say, so-and-so's out, let's deal with this. We'll assign it to whoever's in that can deal with it. And allows us to put certain things in a queue. Hope that helps. That's probably the fastest way of arriving at your question. So other question in the back. Cindy?
We decided to make everything go out for 3 weeks. DVDs, books, whatever it is. I sent in a ticket, it was done the next day.
Yeah, so Cindy had a ticket that she sent in. She wanted to make a change for sending a whole range of her collection out from 3 weeks.
Everything in my library.
Yeah, and then, so we can get it out. We can get it processed, and then it goes into the mapping. So we're getting pretty fast at these changes, but some of them are harder than others. It may not be apparent, but other questions I saw? Okay, yes.
Yeah, if I would like the folks in Utah to consider changing the term delinquent, to whom should I address that?
We have also had an irate patron.
Yes. Yeah. Well, just to piggyback on that, I think patron experience is our most crucial item that we need to be thinking about. So those different language things are huge, and like we're at an enterprise, I know it was either St. Charles or Geneva, it actually says on shelf instead of whatever we say.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering about, is there a group that is looking, I'd like a patron experience group in a sense, who's looking at what is the language they're seeing in enterprise and their account, all of those kinds of things. Are there things that we should be requesting from Symphony, you know, to make these kinds of changes?
We had our youth.
Or else just, we'll all send them in individually.
Yeah,
and say,
so
hey, we don't like the word delinquent.
Yeah.
I'd like to see it organized somehow.
For those online, what was shared was like some of the language that you're seeing in the catalog, such as delinquent, and also some of the current locations that says like standard shelving display versus on shelf and things like that. Those are things that certainly I think we can attempt to adjust as far as what the patrons are seeing online. We did utilize a user experience team leading up through the migration. Certainly, I would like to, there's Anthony over here who was part of that group. I think we can continue to have that group and actually start to expand it and start to look at some of these issues. So that being said, Jamie, I think we have something in place already that we can continue to work with and maybe add folks to that team to look at this and sort of come up with a decision, because some of these are sort of enterprise-wide and some can be profile level. So some of those that are like that. I think the two that came up are probably, those are enterprise-wide, right, Rebecca? Yeah, she's saying, yeah, these are enterprise-wide.
Just as a note, we talked a lot about the word delinquent, and we also want to change it, but we don't know what to change it to. We had like an internal poll, we had a consultant, and we cannot agree. So feel free to like send suggestions.
Throw out a few suggestions right now.
The issue is that it also appears for staff and workflows, because we talked about just hiding the word delinquent.
Yeah.
So your account would be okay, or you would be not okay. It would be no delinquent, but then that takes away the delinquent status in workflows too, and you have like a blank in your dropdown. So it has to work for staff, it has to work for patrons, and it has to work when you have fines owed, or you have overdues, or you have accruing fines. So hit me with it, and I'll implement it.
Okay, so what Rebecca was saying is that, you know, you can send those in as your suggestions for a replacement for delinquent. Maybe we just send it in the ticket system for now, and we can gather those, you know, something like UO fines, fines owed.
Fines owed.
Yeah, because there was nothing like that in Millennium. So I mean, if someone's seeing it, what's the difference? As long as we know what it is.
It's just that delinquent has negative connotations.
Yeah. If
Yeah.
the patron doesn't understand it.
If they're not delinquent, then they won't see it.
Delinquent. How about deviant? No? That wouldn't go over well, would it? All right. Other feedback? We're a quarter after 11. We can keep going for a little bit. If you guys want to end soon, let me know. Oh, we got a couple things on the agenda. Another one from Jamie.
Of course I have another.
All right, come on.
All right, you referred to this earlier, non-standard data entry, okay? Because we're seeing this problem, for example, somebody puts in the wrong item category, so it's all books, they put in realia, whatever.
I'm glad you brought up realia, yeah.
Changes the little symbol, again, it's a patron experience thing, and they think this is not the books, this is not the record for books. And this is a really huge problem for our patrons.
Okay.
Our patrons, not my patrons.
So it's the way facets are being controlled in enterprise and the way the cataloging had been done and how that had come in.
And even moving forward, how cataloging is being done.
Sure.
Because these mistakes are happening now even. So I just want to make sure that when my patron goes to enterprise, they know that's the record they want, is the correct record, and they're not thoroughly confused. It's just bad all the way around. So we have to fix this problem. We have to figure this out.
Yeah, so this is the enterprise facets as far as the format is what we're talking about is maybe not functioning the way it should be because there's data entry that we inherited that got brought in that needs to be fixed and also moving forward. So yes, let's just say that we're well aware of this. It's not news to us that this is an issue, nor is it news to other consortia that use enterprise. So they have some steps that they're taking to help with this, but also more classes, and more guidance on this in terms of being able to catalog things properly.
Erin, has anything come out that maybe I've missed that has said to libraries, look guys, there's this one easy thing you need to do is just select the proper format. This is hugely important. I mean, is this being conveyed so people understand the ramifications of their mistakes? Because someone sitting in technical services may not get it. You know, that here's what happens at the...
Yeah, I hear you. Our lesson from the item migration is clearly there's some staff that don't get it.
Yeah.
I mean, they'll catalog a call number with subfield, they'll say, I'll do A, B, and C. So, and so, yes, there's going to be classes on how to do this and how to correct this. There are overnight processes also that maybe we can rely on to also fix things as they occur. I don't know how much of that I can get into, but yeah, we're aware of how that enterprise in general as a system is exposing a lot of inconsistencies in our database, our catalog, a lot more than it had prior. So we're aware of this, and I appreciate it being brought up, and those of you that are seeing this or aren't aware of it, we may be turning to you guys to help us with doing some of the cleanup. A lot of the cleanup I think we can do, but also it'll be rules that you need to follow moving forward. And if it's not being done right, don't be surprised if you hear from us or hear from the head of our BIP services department, Karen Barr, saying, you're not doing it right. You gotta get on the stick. Other questions? Yes? Blue Island. Hi.
The retention of the previous patron record for books, I came into this process some minutes late, so I don't know if that was decided, if that was being kept.
You're talking about the charge history? Yeah, I don't have a lot I can share on that, so maybe you want to describe the question?
Well, the last checkout is still in the record.
Okay, so last checkout in the record. I don't know if there's anything more we can share.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that SWAN administrators agreed upon years ago. They wanted two, the last and current.
Okay. As far as history, the last two patrons in a checkout on the item being shown, that is something that we were basically putting into place that had been done prior. Are you saying that it's not working, or?
No, it is. I said I came in late in the process.
Oh, is why we do it. Yeah. I think that there was almost recent discussion with, I want to say a year or so ago, with the Circulation Advisory discussing this, and we brought it back to the SWAN board and talked about it some more as far as do we want to change any of this and retain more history or not. So I think we've kind of basically been leaving things in place as they are for a variety of reasons. Other questions, comments? All right, Rich is here. Do we want to move on to the other part of the agenda? Sure. Rich Wolf, our board president. Come on up.
Board elections are happening. The unvoted vote.
Here, hold this low. Okay. Not all the way up to your mouth, but just
thank you.
Over here.
So, board elections are currently under place. So if you haven't voted, please vote. When do they end? The end of the month, a couple of weeks?
Have it right here for you.
Thank you. It's a good person there. The 22nd, the polls close. So, and the quarterly meeting will be on June the 4th, and the focus will be more on what's going to happen instead of a recap of what's happened. So, we just wanted to make sure that everybody got that for today. Other than that, that's pretty much it. I just want to thank Aaron and the staff. I think we owe a big round of applause here.
We were all in it together.
Yes.
I mean, if I said that earlier, and I truly mean it, that everyone helped.
No, very much so. Yeah.
So
well, you did a great job.
Oh, thank you.
I've been through, this is my...
Not every day you get to migrate a system bigger than the city of Chicago, right?
I mean, how many people remember this is like our third migration now, I think? And if you remember the GAC2, no, actually the GAC2 innovative migration, we had to force our ILL rules into the innovative process because we were so upset with how it was doing. So this seems to be, it's been big issues, but it's been peanuts right now. So from remembering from that stuff, if you remember it. So, okay, that's it. Thank you very much.